2 young LGBTQ people were shot in the capital of Slovakia, Bratislava. This unfortunate act happened 2 years ago, and since then, nothing changed. We still have no rights. If anything, it actually got worse. So if we want to know what happened, what was the immediate consequence, and what happened in the last 2 years, listen up. It's a sad story. So before we get to the meat of the video, I'm trying to promote this channel, help with the LGBTQ leadership and push the LGBTQ topics. So if you could start a little bit of love, every share, every like, every subscribe really helps with the algorithm. And now to the main part. So what happened? On 12th of October 2022, 2 LGBTQ people, Matúš and Juraj, were shot and they died as a consequence of it, so they were essentially murdered in a bar in the city center of Bratislava during the bright day. The bar was called Teplaren. And Radka, who was employed at the bar, was also shot, but she thankfully survived. The attacker he wasn't even 20 years old. He was a teenager boy called Juraj, who was radicalized on the internet. And originally he wanted to murder our prime minister, but he couldn't find him. So after a few hours of waiting with a gun of his father in his pocket, he decided that he's going to instead kill as many LGBTQ people as possible because he couldn't shoot the prime minister, which is pretty awful. And then when he committed this heinous act, after waiting a few minutes next to Tepláreň bar, he shot 3 people, he ran away, and then eventually took his own life. So from my perspective, the radicalized youth, it's incredibly unfortunate. And when you are 18 or 19, it's relatively easy to be confused about the state of reality. That I'm not saying that what he did was okay. Obviously, it was awful and hideous, but he was a child. If anything, then I think we should also look at the society and what led him to this act, the hate on the internet, the hate in Slovakian society, the lack of acceptance for LGBTQ community, the reaction of the politicians. These are all the things that we need to look into in order not to allow tragedy as Zámodská to happen again. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that this is not an isolated incident. It would be easy to say that the shooter was insane. But I think in reality, and we see it in the United States and other countries where the terrorist attacks of people who are radicalized are happening, this is a society-wide problem. And why I think he did objectively an awful thing, obviously, it's not as easy as just to say he was insane and that's it. This is upsetting on its own very badly. 1 person was shot, 2 people have died. But I think the aftermath of it was even more upsetting. In terms of the negative things, and I think back then our president, the best president we ever had, Zuzana Čaputová, said a thing that kind of represented the situation rather well when she said, I live in a country that I don't understand, because the aftermath of the tragedy was just so horrendous that people who are like Zuzana Čaputová, people with empathy, were just mortified. I'm just going to give you a few examples. Our ex-prime minister, Matovič, who is honestly clinically insane person, tweeted, I'm straight, out of nowhere. No one asked. This is just a attention whore moment where he's milking a tragedy that hit multiple families in the whole community by saying something that it's going to be controversial and gets media attention. Thank God he's on the political graveyard right now. I hope he stays there. Milan Mazurek, still an active Slovak politician, a straight-on Nazi, back then member of Slovak parliament, not even the worst one, just one of the really bad ones, said that the commemoration event that was following the shooting, where, our president was there, was an LGBTQ propaganda, and he was using this tragedy to spin the political narrative to win political points, or maybe he's just completely delusional. On the protest itself, or on the commemoration march, my mother was there, for instance. I live in a different country, so for me it was difficult to get there in time because it was very short time after the shooting, but my mom was there, and there were roughly 10,000 people. So, I mean, initially people came to kind of support, commemorate, and like show that, that violence is just not acceptable. Almost none of the active politicians spoke at the march because they did not want it to be associated even with something so humane as showing red of 2 young people being murdered just because they were part of the LGBTQ community. And that was also the reason why they didn't want it to be associated with it, because they were part of the LGBTQ community. They became politically toxic for most of the political leaders. It was awful. Honestly, it broke my heart to see the lack of political ownership or even like a humane support of the community that it's also comprised of people who can vote. Like, we are also their constituents, right? There was few positive points that happened. Zuzana Čaputová had a few absolutely beautiful moments, hugging people in front of the cafe and really showing the human face. That was honestly probably the only good thing that came from the political spectrum. I think our prime minister back then was also there, but he just didn't spoke. He just walked a bit and then went home. And the fact that there was 10K protesters, it seems like a lot, but honestly, I mean, Bratislava is the capital. There is 500,000, 600,000 people. Not very, it's nice, but it's also not exceptional. But it gets worse, unfortunately. So this was the immediate aftermath. And you could already see that, there is very little support from the politics and the culture. But then it got worse. And by the way, this was something that really caught me off guard when I talked to my mom after the shooting. She said to me, "Milanko, don't come home. Just stay where you are." And it just made me super sad because, my mom loves me. She wants me to, be with her as much as possible. But she lives in a society where people like me are so not accepted that she would rather have me safe somewhere else, far away from her. And I felt that that's just particularly kind of cruel setting of a society. And there is countless people and countless families that probably have a similar story. So the long aftermath. There was kind of a laughable push for political action where one of the parties called SAS, Freedom and Solidarity, was trying to push something like light version of registered partnership. So essentially something very, not necessarily insulting, but just, very minimalistic through the parliament, which of course failed because it's such an inflammatory topic for most of the politicians in the parliament. This is completely toxic. They cannot touch it because they would just lose so many votes, or they are straight up Nazis. So that was pretty awful, and it also targeted. It's even difficult to speak about. It's been 2 years. It also targeted a controversy in the society, right? So public discussion obviously started to happen, and people started to polarize themselves, and there were a lot of attacks against LGBTQ people in Slovakia. And I remember this one that was particularly awful because it just showed how many people are just straight on homophobic in Slovakian society. So it happened in Kolkovňa, in the River Park. By the way, I'm still boycotting them even after 2 years. There was a gay couple who went to have a dinner. And by the way, River Park is one of the really, really prestigious kind of rich places in Bratislava. It's over the Danube River, and it's kind of all new There are good hotels there, relatively good restaurants. It's the upper shelf neighborhood. And the two guys were dining there, and they shared an intimate moment. They shared a kiss, as any human being who's in love should be allowed to do. They were immediately attacked by a heterosexual couple that was sitting next to them. And I'm not saying attacked like, making noise, but like physical altercation attacked. And while they were attacked, the guy from the heterosexual couple started to praise the shooter from Zámocka, which I think is particularly disgusting. And then you would feel that the staff would stand up and just like, stand up for the human rights and just not tolerate homophobic behavior. But the staff actually decided to kick out the gay couple. And then they called the police, and police didn't do anything. And then, what else do you do? You're a gay couple, you didn't do anything wrong, you shared a kiss, you were assaulted. And neither the staff nor the police that is paid from your own taxes is able to do anything against this absolutely horrendous discrimination. And I really felt that was disgusting. Funny thing, once the community learned about this, Facebook had to block the reviews on the Kolkovna page because there were just so many negative reviews. I think they still have like 1 star or something. But that was another moment when I realized okay, there is a deranged person that murdered 2 people in the city center, which is awful enough, and it's like reason enough for me not to feel safe in my own hometown. But I think the aftermath demonstrated that this is not an isolated problem. It's a community, society, and a state that just genuinely disrespects and hates people like me and sees me as a second-class citizen who cannot show intimacy towards my partner. And I'm not limiting myself with this. You can ask my boyfriend. I'm very open about my love. I think that was one of the moments when I finally understood that Slovakia is just not a place for me. And but I mean, I still had some affection towards the country. So there were multiple protests that were following this for the LGBTQ rights. I went to the second one because that one I could finally make. I arranged my relatively busy schedule. I was already a CEO, and I traveled multiple hundreds of kilometers to make the protest. And I got to the city center with my mom, and there was maybe 1,000 people, maybe 1,500, 2,000. For a city of 500,000 plus, this is absolutely laughable. If this would happen in the Netherlands or in Berlin, everyone would be there. Significant percentage of the population would be there protesting. I mean, LGBTQ people in the society, there is multiple percent, right? And we concentrate in the capital. So why, where were we? That was another super disappointing moment because I realized okay, the whole society is rigged against us. The rules are rigged against us. But even we are not able to stand for ourselves. I was morbidly disappointing. I remember being mad and my mom had to calm me down, being oh, calm down, Milan, don't make a scene. I was so disappointed. It was awful. Well, and there was 2 years anniversary commemoration, and honestly, things just got worse. We still don't have any protections whatsoever. We don't have registered partnerships. We don't nothing, zero. There's anti-discrimination law, which is generic, but nobody applies it. We are not far off from Russia or Belarus. I mean, Thailand, which, by the way, country that I love, it's significantly more liberal than Slovakia, a member of European Union. Ecuador is more liberal. And I'm good for them. We should all be liberal and promote love. But it's just so shameful. That country that has all these opportunities to become better because it has membership in European Union, NATO, all the economic power, the lack of poverty, and we fail to support our own citizens, it's just something that I refuse to stand for. And that is why I'm not living at home, because it's ludicrous, honestly. And in terms of how it got worse, obviously there was a political campaign. The party that won the elections, kind of this casual populist party of Robert Fico, like openly attacked transgender people. And the guy is probably not even transgender. He's just doing it to like win points. And I'm not even gonna quote him, but he like made fun of their like genitals as absolutely disgusting. And then there was a gymnasium, a high school, that had a nice initiative to, commemorate a tragedy, and they suggested on an opt-in basis, ergo not being mandatory, that children can come to school dressed in colorful clothing to remember. Freaking Livia, this Nazi influencer from Slovakia, took the topic and popularized it, and then one of the, I think it was the member of European Parliament from Slovakia, who's also a straight up Nazi, because we always elect something completely stupid, made it a topic and started to attack it as an LGBTQ propaganda. It's a commemoration of 2 people being killed, you twat. I mean, what are you talking about? Read a book. And thank God the mayor of the city stood up against them, and the event happened. But the fact that we just have this discussion, it's ridiculous. And I think that is something that the Western world is often missing about the Eastern Europe. I'm super happy for you that you have the discussion about the relevant content, cutting edge, like social problems such as transgender rights and acceptance of non-binary people and pronouns and whatnot. And I'm part of that discussion, right? Like I also went to like Western elite university, whatever else. But there are countries in European Union where it's still dangerous as a politician to come out or to support any LGBTQ topic, honestly. And it's awful. If I want to have rights and if I want to adopt a child, eventually I have to change my citizenship because I have to like live somewhere else, because it's never going to happen in Slovakia during my lifetime, because the country is just so incredibly backwards. And I have a huge part of my family in Slovakia. My mother lives there, and I could bring a lot of value to the country if by anything else than just paying taxes there. But I won't, and I can't. First of all, because I'm incredibly disappointed by how my community has been handled, but mostly because I simply just don't feel safe there. And why would I take my Oxford diploma to a place that doesn't have enough respect for me even to acknowledge that I have the same rights as anyone else, when there is so many countries out there that would love to have me? Look, I'm sorry, I cannot cut off the script, but it's super personal and it's honestly infuriating. And I can't believe that it has been 2 years since the awful tragedy and we're still talking about the same thing. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry if it got a bit too dark. I love you.